Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. Wesley West hated church bells, especially at night. They always sounded like warnings, not prayers, not peace. Warnings. The bell above Deadstone Chapel groaned once into the desert dark, low and heavy, like the town itself was trying to cough up something buried. Young Wesley ran harder. His boots pounded against the old wooden floorboards as he shoved through the chapel doors, gun already drawn, heart hammering so hard it made his vision pulse. "Eli!" His voice cracked against the empty pews. No answer. Moonlight spilled through the stained glass windows in broken colors. Red across the altar, blue across the pews, gold across the blood. Too much blood. His breath hitched. The church smelled wrong. Copper, rot, and something wet and animal beneath it. "Eli?" Still nothing. Only the old wood creaking and the soft, horrible sound of dripping. Wesley moved deeper, every nerve in his body screaming at him to turn around, to run, to get out. But Eli Harper was his partner. You didn't leave your partner. Not ever. His flashlight shook in his hand as he reached the altar. That was where he found him. At first, his mind refused to understand what it was seeing. A body twisted wrong, one arm bent beneath him, his sheriff's badge half buried in blood, and his wedding ring still on his hand. Eyes open, staring, empty. Wesley stopped breathing. The gun nearly slipped from his fingers. "No." The word barely came out. Claw marks raked deep across Eli's chest, flesh torn open like something had tried to peel him apart. Blood soaked the church floor and ran between the old wooden planks. Not a bear, not a man. Something worse. Something impossible. Something that had black eyes. Something that watched from the dark. A sound moved above him, a slow scrape. Wesley froze. His flashlight tilted upward. The beam caught only rafters, dust, and shadows. Nothing. But he could feel it watching, waiting. His hand tightened on the gun. "Show yourself." Silence. Then, a whisper, right behind him, so close he felt the breath against his neck. "Remember." Wesley spun and woke with a violent gasp. His office chair nearly tipped backward. Morning light stabbed through the blinds of the station. His coffee sat black and cold beside a stack of case files. His cigar had burned itself into a crooked line of ash in the tray. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Church, blood, Eli. The whisper still clung to him like smoke. He rubbed both hands over his face and muttered a curse under his breath. 58 years old and still dreaming like a man with unfinished sins. The station around him buzzed with its usual late afternoon noise. Phones ringing, boots crossing tile, somebody laughing too loud near dispatch. Normal, safe. Not Deadstone, not that church. A shadow fell across his desk. Wesley looked up. Captain Morris stood there with the expression of a man already regretting the conversation. "You look like hell." Wesley reached for his coffee, drank it cold anyway. "You always know how to flirt, Morris." Morris dropped a manila folder onto the desk. "We got another one." Wesley stared at it. "Please tell me it's not another drunk guy claiming his horse is possessed." Morris sighed. Deadstone. That made Wesley pause, not visibly, not enough for most people to notice, but enough. He leaned back slowly. Deadstone. Morris nodded. Anonymous call came in, heavy breathing, laughing, whispering. Dispatch could barely make it out. Wesley said nothing. Morris continued. Only clear thing they got was, "They're here," Wesley said. Morris blinked. "Yeah." Silence stretched between them. Wesley stared at the folder like it had personally insulted him. Friday afternoon, Deadstone, same old nonsense. That tiny desert town 30 minutes out liked its bad habits. Cheap beer, bad weather, and teenagers with too much boredom and not enough supervision. Every few months, they called the station with ghost stories and drunk nonsense, usually on weekends, usually stupid, usually harmless. Usually. Wesley stood, grabbed the folder, and reached for his hat. "I'm taking the kid." Morris smirked. "Thought you hated the kid." "I do." "Then why take him?" Wesley settled the cowboy hat on his head. "Because if I go alone, I'll have to listen to my own thoughts." Waylen Pierce was exactly where Wesley expected him to be. At his desk, trying and failing to look like a man who belonged there. He sat too straight, like posture alone could earn respect. His uniform was too neat, his notebook too organized, and his expression was permanently trapped somewhere between eager and mildly terrified. 30 years old and still carrying the nervous energy of a kid on the first day of school, Wesley had seen stray dogs look more confident. Waylen looked up the second Wesley approached, nearly knocking over his coffee in the process. "Boss." Wesley kept walking. "It's Wesley." "Right. Sorry. Wesley. Boss." Wesley stopped and slowly turned. Waylen gave the kind of smile usually seen on people seconds before natural selection stepped in. Wesley stared at him while Waylen straightened in his chair. "I'm joking. You're not funny enough to joke that early in the day." "Yes, sir." "Worse." Waylen sighed dramatically and reached for his coffee. Wesley slapped the folder onto the desk hard enough to make him jump, splashing coffee everywhere. As Waylen fumbled for napkins, Wesley announced, "We've got a call." Waylen froze, real excitement hitting his face so fast it was almost embarrassing. A real call? No, kid, I'm taking you to Disneyland. Waylen ignored that entirely. Where? Deadstone. The excitement dimmed a little. Even rookies knew Deadstone. A small town in the middle of nowhere with a population far too large for how creepy it was. It had the kind of reputation small towns built for themselves when there wasn't much else to do. Missing dogs, ghost stories, weird lights in the desert, and old people who swore the church bell rang on nights nobody touched it. Most of it was nonsense. Probably. Waylen stood so fast his chair rolled backward and slammed into a filing cabinet. He winced while Wesley closed his eyes briefly. I haven't even told you what happened. Sorry, right, sorry. He sat, then stood again, then sat. Wesley watched this like a man reconsidering every life choice that had led him here. Anonymous call came in, he said. Heavy breathing, laughing, whispering, somebody saying they're here. Waylen blinked. That's horrifying. It's teenagers. Or cults. It's teenagers. Waylen nodded thoughtfully. Teenage cults. Wesley pointed at him. This is why I smoke. Waylen grinned despite himself, and Wesley hated that grin because it made the kid look hopeful. Hopeful people were dangerous. They made you care. He turned away before that thought could settle too long. Grab your notebook. Waylen looked down. My notebook? The one you keep writing in like you're solving the Da Vinci Code. Waylen picked it up quickly. I take notes. You write down everything I say. That's because sometimes you say wise things. I once told you gas station sushi is how people meet God. Waylen tucked the notebook into his jacket. And I wrote it down. Wesley muttered something that sounded like a prayer for patience and started walking. Behind him, Waylen scrambled to grab his keys, his pen, and his sunglasses, dropping all three. He cursed under his breath, bent to grab them, and somehow tripped over his own chair. The crash echoed through the station. Several officers looked up, but nobody looked surprised. Wesley stood at the door with both hands on his hips. Kid? Waylen was halfway tangled in furniture. Yes. Cool your britches. I'm trying. Try faster. Waylen untangled himself and hurried after him, still fixing his tie like it had personally betrayed him. Outside, the Arizona heat hit like an open oven. Dust curled along the parking lot in lazy spirals as Wesley's old patrol cruiser sat beneath the brutal sun, looking as tired as he felt. He slid behind the wheel, and Waylen climbed into the passenger seat with the energy of a man boarding his first roller coaster. Wesley started the engine. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The station disappeared behind them, replaced by a road that stretched ahead. Long, empty, and dusty. Deadstone waited 30 minutes west, sitting like a forgotten mistake in the middle of nowhere. Waylen adjusted in his seat, then adjusted again, and then again. Wesley lit a cigar without looking at him. If you keep squirming like that, I'm charging you for the upholstery. I'm not squirming. You're vibrating. Waylen stared out the window for exactly 7 seconds. Then, so, How long have you been doing this? Wesley exhaled smoke toward the cracked window. Too long. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Waylen nodded. Silence again for 5 seconds. Then, did you always know you wanted to be a detective? Wesley gripped the wheel tighter. The desert rolled past in long stretches of dead brush and fence posts, leaning like tired men. His reflection stared back at him from the windshield. Older now. Harder. But sometimes, in the wrong light, he still saw the rookie. Still saw blood. Still heard church bells. No, he said finally. Waylen glanced over. What did you want? Wesley took a slow drag from the cigar. Peace and quiet. Waylen smiled. And how's that working out for you? Wesley gave him a look from behind dark sunglasses. You're in my passenger seat. Waylen laughed. Real easy laughter. For some reason, Wesley didn't hate it. The road stretched on, the sun lowered, and somewhere ahead, buried beneath dust and memory. Deadstone waited. Deadstone looked like the kind of town people apologized for being from. Waylen saw it first from the passenger window. Small against the horizon, half swallowed by heat shimmer and desert dust. The road narrowed as they approached, the pavement giving up on life and turning into cracked asphalt and loose gravel. A faded wooden sign leaned crooked near the entrance. Welcome to Deadstone. Population 10,214. Someone had spray painted over the last number, so it simply read 1021, like even the town itself had forgotten how many people were left. Waylen stared at it as they passed. That feels encouraging. Wesley kept driving. Towns like this collect bad decisions. That sounds weirdly poetic. It's not poetry, it's police work. Deadstone unfolded around them in slow, miserable pieces. The main street was a dusty stretch of old Western leftovers. Storefronts with broken windows, faded signs hanging crooked, and a bakery that looked like it had given up emotionally sometime in 1997. Tumbleweeds rolled lazily across the road. Fog drifted low between buildings in pale blue-gray ribbons, wrong for the dry heat, wrong for the hour. At the very end of town stood the church. White paint peeling, bell tower crooked, and a cross leaning slightly to one side. Watching. Waylen frowned. Do churches usually look threatening? Only the honest ones. There were no people, no kids on bikes, no barking dogs, and no music through open windows. Even the birds were gone. Waylen sat up straighter as that nervous excitement from earlier curdled into something colder. This is weird. Wesley pulled the cruiser to a slow stop in the middle of the street. The engine idled, and neither of them moved as the silence pressed against the windows like something alive. It wasn't just quiet. It was absence, like the whole town had stepped outside for a moment and forgotten to come back. Wesley killed the engine, and immediately the silence got worse. He reached for the glove compartment, and Waylen watched him pull out his sidearm and check it. That made something in Wayland's stomach drop. "Okay," Wayland said carefully. "That feels like a bad sign." Wesley stepped out of the car. "That's because it is." Wayland followed quickly, trying very hard not to look like he was rushing. The heat hit first, then the smell. Wayland stopped. "What is that?" Wesley stood still in the middle of the road, sunglasses tilted slightly as he scanned the buildings. Wayland smelled it now beneath the dust. Rot, old meat, and something sweet and wrong underneath it, like flowers left too long at a funeral. He swallowed hard. "I officially hate this." Wesley didn't answer. His whole body had changed to stillness and focus. He looked less like an old detective and more like an animal listening for another predator. Wayland followed his gaze to the church. Something about it made his skin tighten. Not fear exactly, but recognition, like standing outside a house from a dream you forgot until that moment. "Have you been here before?" Wayland asked. Wesley answered too quickly. "No." Wayland nodded slowly, certain that was a lie. Before he could say it, something moved. A shadow crossed the second-floor window of the bakery. Fast, gone. Wayland froze. "Did you see?" "Yes." Wesley was already moving, gun drawn, fast and certain. Wayland scrambled after him, pulling his own weapon with significantly less grace. They pushed through the bakery door, and the little bell above it jingled, sounding too cheerful for the circumstances. Inside, the place looked abandoned mid-breath. Bread still sat on cooling racks, and a coffee mug rested beside an open newspaper as if someone had simply stood up and walked away. Dust coated everything, but not enough dust for days. This was recent. Wayland stepped carefully between overturned chairs. "Hello?" Wesley shot him a look. "What?" "If there's a murderer in here, yelling hello saves them time." "That feels rude." "That's because murder is rude." Wayland opened his mouth, then closed it. "Fair." Something creaked upstairs. Both of them looked up. Slowly, another sound followed. A soft, dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across wood. Wayland's grip tightened on his gun as his pulse pounded. Wesley started toward the stairs. Wayland whispered, "I feel like splitting up would be a terrible idea." Wesley kept walking. "It is." "Great. Which is why we're doing it." Wayland stopped. "I'm sorry, what?" Wesley turned at the foot of the stairs. "You take the east side of town. I'll sweep west. We cover more ground." Wayland stared at him. In every horror movie ever made, that decision gets people eaten. Wesley adjusted his hat. "Good thing this isn't a movie." A beat passed. Then, "If I die, I'm haunting you specifically." Wesley gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Get in line, kid." And with that, he disappeared up the stairs, leaving Wayland alone in the bakery with his gun, his fear, and the growing certainty that he had made several poor career choices. The second floor of the bakery was empty, and Wesley hated that more than if it hadn't been. An empty room meant questions. A body meant answers. He moved slowly through the narrow upstairs apartment above the shop, gun raised, every old floorboard complaining beneath his boots. He checked a child's bedroom with its small bed, yellow blanket, and a stuffed rabbit missing one eye. He checked the closet, the kitchen, and the bathroom. Nothing. But the wrongness stayed. It clung to the walls. That heavy feeling that said someone had left too fast or been taken too suddenly to leave at all. On the kitchen table sat 2 plates, one half-eaten, one untouched. Beside them lay a child's drawing of crayon stick figures, a little house, and a church. Behind the church were tall black shapes with red circles for eyes. Wesley stared at it, his jaw tightening. Kids drew what adults ignored. He folded the picture and slipped it into his pocket. Downstairs, the old bakery bell jingled again. Waylen, probably alive. Probably. Wesley headed back down. Outside, the town looked even quieter somehow, the kind of silence that made your own breathing sound intrusive. He stepped into the street and lit another cigar, though the first drag settled his nerves exactly none. His radio crackled once with static, then silence. He pressed the button. Waylen. Nothing. Again. Kid. Only static. Wesley lowered the radio slowly as the wind shifted. That smell returned. Rot, copper, and something dead left too long in the heat. Blood. It was fresh enough to carry a scent, and he followed it past the deli and the old gas station toward the saloon. Of course it was the saloon. Places like Deadstone always kept their secrets in bars and churches. The swinging wooden doors groaned as he pushed inside. Dim light spilled through dusty windows, cutting the room into long shadows. Broken bottles glittered across the floor near overturned chairs, and a table split clean in half. Something violent had happened here, and it was recent. Wesley crouched, noting blood droplets marking the old wooden floor. Not much, just enough to lead him deeper inside. He followed them carefully, stepping around shattered glass. Behind the bar, shelves of liquor stood crooked and half-empty, a bottle of whiskey rolling lazily as the wind slipped through the cracks in the wall. His reflection caught briefly in the mirror. An old man in a cowboy hat with too many ghosts. He kept moving. The blood trail led toward the back stairs and the upper balcony that wrapped around the saloon walls. Wesley stopped, every instinct in his body pulling tight. Watched. It was the same feeling from years ago. The church. The blood. Eli. Something was wrong. Something was. A whisper. Soft. Almost affectionate. Above him. He looked up fast, gun raised. The balcony stood empty with its dust and broken railing, but he knew better. His pulse thudded slow and hard. He stepped backward, eyes still trained upward. The whisper came again. Not words, just breath, a wet little sound from the dark. His hand tightened on the gun.
Show yourself.
Silence. Then, a single drop landed on the brim of his hat. Wesley frowned. Another drop. Warm. He reached up, touched his forehead and pulled his fingers back, red. Blood. Not his. Slowly, very slowly, he looked up, and there it was, hanging upside down from the ceiling beams above the bar like a grotesque spider. Its limbs were too long, its body lean and wrong, stretched like something that had once tried to be human and failed. Black scaled skin clung tight over sharp bones, and its hands ended in hooked claws buried into old wood. Its mouth was wet with blood. Above it, slumped across the balcony railing, was what remained of someone from town. Fed on. Half gone. The creature's black eyes locked onto Wesley. No whites, no mercy. Only hunger. It smiled. Wesley's gun came up. The creature moved first. It dropped like a nightmare, fast, too fast. 1 second it was on the ceiling, the next it was crashing into him with enough force to send them both through a table. Wood exploded and glass shattered. Pain lit up Wesley's shoulder as he hit the floor hard, his gun skidding across the saloon boards and disappearing beneath the bar. Son of a... The creature was already on him. Its claws slammed beside his head, splintering wood, and its breath hit his face, hot, wet, and carrying a stench of blood and rot so thick it turned his stomach. Up close it was worse. Its skin looked almost burned, stretched tight and black with thin ridges, like scales beneath the surface. Its jaw unhinged too wide, showing long teeth made for tearing. Its eyes were black and endless, leaning close enough for Wesley to see his own reflection. Old, tired, but not done yet. The creature whispered. It didn't growl or hiss. It whispered in the same broken voice from the call, the dream, and from 30 years ago. Remember. Cold shot through him as the saloon vanished. For one violent second, he heard church bells and saw blood on the altar. Eli was screaming while Wesley was on his knees with red hands. He heard a judge asking, "Did you kill your partner?" Flash. The creature lunged for his throat. Instinct took over as Wesley drove his forearm up under its jaw, teeth snapping inches from his neck. His free hand scrambled at his belt. No gun, but he had a knife. Its claws raked across his ribs, and white-hot pain tore through him. Wesley grunted and shoved harder, his boots scraping uselessly against broken wood. Ugly bastard. His fingers finally found the knife at the small of his back. The creature smiled again, like it remembered too. Wesley ripped the blade free and drove it upward with everything he had, straight into its skull. The sound it made was awful, a wet, choking shriek that rattled the bottles behind the bar. Its body convulsed as black blood spilled hot across his hands, then it collapsed into dead weight. Still. For a moment, Wesley just lay there beneath it, breathing hard and staring at the cracked ceiling. His chest rose and fell like he'd run for miles while his ribs screamed and his shoulder throbbed. Underneath it all was memory. Not complete. Just pieces. Eli's badge, the church floor, and that same voice saying, "Remember." Wesley shoved the corpse off and sat up slowly, every joint filing a formal complaint. He spat blood and muttered, "I'm too old for this." Then, a crash from outside, followed by Waylen screaming, "Wesley!" Every muscle in his body locked. No, not again. The world narrowed instantly. There was no saloon, no pain, and no 30-year gap. There was just the sound of a partner screaming and Wesley running. He grabbed his gun from beneath the bar and bolted out the doors, ignoring the pain in his side.
Waylen.
No answer, only wind. Then another scream came, closer this time, near the general store. Wesley ran faster, boots pounding dirt and breath burning. His vision flashed with images of Eli on the church floor. Blood, failure. No, not this time. Not this kid. Not again. He rounded the corner hard and nearly slammed into the scene. Waylen was pinned beneath a fallen wooden shelf outside the general store, half covered in canned goods, dust, and several deeply offended bags of flour. Alive, screaming, panicking. Very alive. Wesley stopped dead, relief hit first, followed by immediate irritation. He stood there breathing hard, blood on his shirt and knife still in hand, staring at the disaster. Waylen blinked up at him. Hi. Wesley closed his eyes slowly and carefully, like a man asking God for patience. You screamed like you were being murdered. Waylen winced. In my defense, I thought I was. Wesley looked at the shelf, then at him, then back at the shelf. Buy soup? Waylen shifted under the wreckage. It fell really aggressively. Wesley stared at him like reconsidering rescue was still an available option. Waylen, pinned beneath approximately half the general store and what felt like the emotional weight of his own embarrassment, offered a weak smile. Good news, he said. I found clues. Wesley planted both hands on his hips. If one of those clues is how you keep ending up under furniture, I'd love to hear it. It attacked me. Wesley looked around the empty street. With what, passive aggression? Waylen sighed. No, before the shelf, I heard something inside, something moving. I followed it, and then, boom, shelf. Boom shelf, Wesley repeated flatly. Yes, that's your official statement? Waylen considered it. Dramatic shelf-related assault? Wesley pinched the bridge of his nose. There was blood on his shirt, a tear in his sleeve, and his hat was slightly crooked. Waylen frowned. Wait, what happened to you? Better instincts. That was not an answer, and Waylen decided, for the sake of survival, not to press. Wesley finally grabbed the edge of the fallen shelf. On 3. Waylen nodded. 1. The shelf lifted immediately. Waylen yelped. That is not 3. With a painful groan and significantly less dignity than he would have preferred, Waylen crawled free and stood, brushing dust off himself. Everything hurt, mostly his pride. I'm fine. You're limping? I'm limping professionally. Wesley muttered something that sounded suspiciously like affection and turned back toward the store. That was when Waylen saw it. Something pale beneath the broken wood. At first, his brain refused to identify it, then it did, and he wished it hadn't. He stopped breathing. Wesley. Something in his voice made the older man turn immediately. Waylen pointed, slowly, carefully, Wesley knelt and pulled aside a broken crate. There, half buried beneath splintered wood and spilled cans, was a human foot. It was severed clean at the ankle, still wearing a brown leather boot. Silence. Even the wind seemed to step back. Waylen swallowed hard. His mouth had gone dry. "Well," he said weakly, "that feels less like teenagers." Wesley stood slowly. His face had gone still in that dangerous way. No sarcasm, no jokes, just calculation, hard evidence, real blood, real death. This wasn't prank calls or Deadstone being weird. This was a massacre. Waylen looked at the empty street again, and suddenly every window felt like an eye. "How many people do you think?" "I don't know." Wesley's voice was low, and that scared Waylen more than if he'd shouted, because Wesley always sounded like he knew. Always. He looked toward the church at the end of town. The crooked white building stood silent beneath the lowering sun, watching and waiting. Waylen followed his gaze. "You keep looking at that church." Wesley didn't answer. That meant yes. Before Waylen could push further, Wesley turned sharply. "Car." They moved fast now. No more slow searching, no more pretending this was routine. They crossed the street toward the patrol cruiser, dust kicking beneath their boots. Waylen kept checking behind them. Every shadow felt wrong, and every alley was too dark. He hated all of it. The closer they got to the car, the more the silence pressed in, like the whole town was listening. Wesley yanked open the driver's side door and grabbed the radio mic. His voice was sharp.
"This is Detective West. We need immediate backup in Deadstone. Possible multiple fatalities. Repeat."
Only static answered. He tried again. Nothing. More static, then dead silence. Waylen pulled out his phone. No bars. He held it up like altitude might help. Still nothing. Wesley slammed the radio back into place. Waylen frowned. "Tell me the cruiser at least works." Wesley didn't answer. He just turned the key. The engine coughed once, then nothing. Again, nothing. Dead. Waylen stared. No. Again. Nothing. The silence afterward was somehow louder. Waylen laughed once, a small panicked sound. "Oh good, fantastic, wonderful. I love this for us." Wesley stepped out of the cruiser slowly. The sun had dropped lower now, staining the whole town in gold and shadow. Night was coming, and suddenly that felt like a threat. Waylen joined him outside as the wind moved through Deadstone like something breathing. What now? Wesley looked toward the church. This time, he didn't deny it. His jaw tightened and his hand rested near his gun. For the first time since they'd arrived, he looked afraid, not of monsters, but of memory. He stared at the church like it had been waiting for him. Maybe it had. Finally, he said, "Now, kid." His voice was rough. "We find out what I forgot." The church had not changed, and that was the first thing Wesley hated. 30 years should have made it smaller somehow, or less sharp, but instead it stood exactly as it had in his nightmares. White paint peeled like old skin, the bell tower leaned slightly west, and the cross above the doors was crooked enough to look like even God had tried to leave. It sat at the end of Deadstone like the final sentence in a bad confession. Waiting. Waylen walked beside him, unusually quiet now. Even he could feel it. Some places didn't need explanations. They introduced themselves. Long shadows stretched over the church steps like fingers as they crossed the empty street. Wesley stopped at the bottom, his chest tight and his ribs aching from the saloon fight. Underneath the smell of cigar smoke and monster blood was a real, raw fear he hadn't admitted to since he was 30. Waylen looked over. "You okay?" No. That surprised both of them. Waylen adjusted his grip on his gun. That was weirdly honest. Don't get used to it. They climbed the steps, each creak of old wood sounding louder than the last. Wesley stared at the front doors, noting the same brass handles and the same splinter near the frame from the day Eli had laughed and said, "If I die in a church, I'm haunting you forever." Wesley pushed the doors open. The smell hit first. Dust, rot, old wood, and something deeper, something buried. Inside, moonlight filtered through stained glass in long broken colors across the pews, red, blue, and gold. Just like before. For one awful second, time folded. He was young again, gun shaking, Eli alive, then dead. Blood on the altar, the whisper. Remember. Wesley. Waylen's voice pulled him back to the present. He exhaled slowly. Stay close. Waylen looked around the sanctuary. This place is aggressively haunted. Helpful. I'm just saying if a ghost Victorian child asks me to play hide and seek, I'm leaving. Despite himself, Wesley almost smiled. Almost. They moved deeper inside. The pews were covered in dust, but the center aisle wasn't. There were tracks, fresh, dragged footsteps, as if people had been pulled toward the altar. Waylen crouched. Multiple sets. His voice was steadier now, focused. This was where the kid shined when fear stopped being abstract and became a puzzle. Wesley nodded. Good eyes. Waylen blinked. Did you just compliment me? Don't make it weird. Too late. I'm framing this moment. They followed the marks to the altar where Wesley found it. A sheriff's badge, old and scratched, half buried beneath dust and dried black blood. His hand trembled. He already knew. E.H. Eli Harper. Waylen saw the look on his face and didn't joke this time. Who was he? Wesley stared at the badge as the church faded into memories of courtroom lights and whispering people. He remembered standing there, blood on his boots, unable to explain monsters no one would believe. Suspicion had been easier than the impossible. He was my partner, Wesley said. Waylen waited. Wesley's voice dropped lower. And for a long time, I thought maybe I killed him. The silence was heavy and honest. Waylen stood beside him, not too close, just enough. "I don't think that." Wesley let out a dry laugh. "You should. I did." A sound moved above them in the dark choir loft. Then a whisper. It was soft, but many voices this time, like a nest of mouths speaking at once. "Remember." The temperature in the church seemed to drop. Waylen whispered, "Please tell me that was just bad acoustics." Wesley slowly reached for his gun. "No, kid." Above them, shadows moved, plural. Watching, waiting. And then the first body dropped from the rafters. The body hit the church floor with a sound Waylen would hear in his nightmares forever. Wet, heavy, and wrong. He flinched so hard he nearly fired on instinct. It was human, or had been, judging by the torn flannel shirt and the wedding ring still clinging to one hand. His throat was ripped open, and his chest looked like something had tried to crawl inside him instead of out. Waylen swallowed hard. Nope. Above them, the whispering grew louder, scraping, movement, not one, but several. Wesley's voice came low and sharp. "Gun up." Waylen obeyed instantly. The shadows along the rafters shifted, and then black eyes opened in the dark. One pair, then another, then 6 more, watching, tracking, heat-seeking predators. Waylen's mouth went dry. The first Shadow Stalker dropped. Then another, then another. Too fast, too many. Bullets exploded through the church, gunfire cracking against stained glass and old wood as Wesley fired first. Clean, controlled shots. One creature dropped. Another hit the floor, still moving, dragging itself forward with broken claws. Waylen fired and missed entirely. "Fantastic," he muttered. "Love that for me." A creature launched from the pews and slammed into him. He hit the floor hard, gun skidding away. Claws scraped inches from his face as he shoved both arms up, trying to keep its snapping jaws away from his throat. It was heavier than it looked, and stronger. Its breath smelled like graves. The thing shrieked in his face. Somewhere to his left, Wesley shouted his name. Waylen twisted, desperate, and grabbed the nearest thing his hand found. A fallen brass candle holder. Good enough. He swung with every ounce of panic and poor decision-making in his body. Clang, the creature reeled. Waylen hit it again and again. On the third hit, it collapsed sideways, still twitching. Waylen lay there breathing like a man who had just fought God in a parking lot. Across the church, Wesley moved like violence had personally trained him. Gunfire, knife, brutal efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Like he had done this before. Like part of him had been waiting for this night. Another creature lunged from the choir loft. Wesley turned too late, but Waylen saw it first. "Wesley!" Without thinking, he grabbed his fallen gun, aimed badly, and fired. The shot shattered stained glass and missed the creature entirely, but it startled it enough. Wesley turned, caught it mid-lunge, and put 2 bullets straight through its skull. Black blood sprayed across the altar. Silence followed. Brief. Breathing hard, Waylen pushed himself up. His tie was gone, and his dignity had left hours ago. He pointed weakly at the dead creature beside him. "I had that handled." Wesley looked at the candle holder, then at him. With church decor? It was spiritually effective. Wesley stared then to Waylen's absolute shock. He laughed. Short, rough, real. It vanished almost immediately, but it had happened. Waylen blinked. Did you just... Don't. I made you laugh. I'm armed. Waylen grinned despite the blood and terror. Worth it. Then the church bell rang. Once, deep, violent. Both of them froze. The sound rolled through the building like thunder, and beneath it came screaming, not from inside the church, but from outside. The town. More than one voice. Many. Waylen turned toward the doors, his stomach dropping. That sounds like a lot of people. Wesley's expression hardened instantly because he knew the church hadn't been the nest. It had been the warning. Outside, in the dying light of Deadstone, the rest of them were waking up. The town had become a mouth, screaming. From the church steps, Wesley and Waylen stood beneath the crooked bell tower and watched Deadstone come alive in the worst possible way. Doors slammed open and windows shattered. Figures stumbled into the streets. Not people anymore, not fully. Some moved wrong, jerking like broken puppets. Others crawled low across rooftops and storefronts, black-eyed and fast, scaling walls like insects. Shapes peeled themselves from alley shadows and moved with terrible purpose toward the church, toward them, toward heat, toward blood. Waylen stood beside him, breathing hard. That feels like too many. Wesley reloaded calmly. It is. How calm are you right now? I'm furious. Okay, weirdly comforting. The sun was sinking fast. Orange light bled across the town, turning the dust red. Night would make them stronger. That thought sat heavy. Wesley looked toward the patrol cruiser parked down the street. His old truck sat beyond it near the saloon, half hidden behind the bakery. Good. Because unlike the cruiser, his truck believed in preparation and paranoia, both valuable traits. He holstered his weapon and started down the church steps. Waylen blinked. Where are you going? My truck. There are nightmare lizards between us and your truck. Yes. And that's not a deterrent. No. Waylen followed immediately. Cool. I also enjoy suicidal field trips. They moved fast through the street, staying low, cutting between abandoned storefronts while screams echoed deeper in town. The smell of blood had thickened. Deadstone was feeding. Wesley's ribs screamed every time he moved too fast, but pain had become background noise years ago. Ahead, a shape moved across the roof of the bakery. Watching. Black eyes catching the last light. It vanished. Waylen saw it too. I saw that. I know. I hated it. I know. Another flash. Not here. Then, young Wesley running. Eli shouting. West, move. Claws, gunfire, church bells. Flash. Back to now. Wesley slowed for half a second. Waylen noticed. Again. You're remembering. Not a question. Wesley didn't answer. Because yes and no. Pieces. Fragments. Like his own mind had become a crime scene. They reached the truck. Old, dust-covered, and reliable. Wesley opened the back, and Waylen stared. Oh my God. Ammo boxes, extra firearms, road flares, a hunting knife the size of personal regret, 2 flashlights, a crowbar, and enough emergency supplies to survive the collapse of civilization. Waylen looked at him. You drive around like Batman with lower emotional availability. Wesley handed him a shotgun. I prepare. Waylen held it carefully. I've never used one of these. Tonight's full of firsts. Wesley grabbed a duffel and headed back toward the saloon. Waylen hurried after him. Where now? The bar. Why? Wesley didn't slow. Because if monsters want hell. He shoved open the saloon doors. Broken glass still glittered across the floor, and the dead Shadow Stalkers still lay where he'd left it. He stepped behind the bar and started grabbing liquor bottles. Waylen watched as understanding dawned. You're making Molotov cocktails. Wesley lit another cigar. Yes. Waylen stared. That is the coolest thing you've ever done. Wesley stuffed a rag into a whiskey bottle. It's not for cool, it's for survival. It can be both. Another scream outside, closer now. Waylen's humor faded as his grip tightened on the shotgun. Do you think anyone's still alive? Wesley paused. He looked at the town through the dusty saloon window, at the moving shadows, at the church waiting at the end of the road, and at the ghosts of 30 years standing beside it. Finally, quietly, I think if anyone is. He looked at Waylen. They're waiting for us to stop running. That landed, because it wasn't just about Deadstone, it was about Eli. It always had been. Waylen nodded once. No joke this time, just understanding. Outside, night finally arrived. And with it, the hunt began. Night changed everything. Deadstone in daylight had felt abandoned, but Deadstone at night felt occupied. The streets were swallowed in deep blue shadow, and the wind moved slowly through the town, dragging dust and whispers with it. Somewhere far off, glass shattered, then silence, then footsteps. Not human, too fast, too light, and too many. Waylen stood in the middle of the saloon with a shotgun in one hand and a Molotov cocktail in the other. He tried very hard not to think about how absurd his life had become. 12 hours ago, he had been alphabetizing paperwork. Now he was preparing to fight underground nightmare creatures with bar supplies. Call it career growth. Wesley loaded ammunition at the bar like a man preparing for a very inconvenient dinner party. He was calm, focused, and terrifying. Waylen watched him for a moment before speaking quietly. You really thought you killed him? Wesley didn't look up. For a second, Waylen thought he might ignore it, then, Yes. Simple. Heavy. Waylen shifted. The partner. Wesley nodded once. The saloon creaked around them, and something moved across the roof outside, but neither of them reacted. They were past reacting. I was young, Wesley said. His voice stayed on the work, not the memory. I was 30, thought I knew everything, thought instinct made me invincible. He checked the chamber of his revolver. It was our first big call in Deadstone. Missing people, strange animal attacks, people disappearing near the church. Waylen listened carefully. Even the silence listened. We found blood, tracks, stories no one wanted to say out loud. Wesley's jaw tightened. Eli believed me. Nobody else did. He grabbed another bottle. We went into that church at night, thought we were hunting an animal. A bitter laugh. We were stupid enough to think bullets solved everything. Waylen swallowed. What happened? Wesley finally stopped moving. There was stillness, the dangerous kind. I heard him scream. The words barely came out. I found him on the altar. Flash. Blood, Eli's hand, wedding ring, black eyes in the rafters. Another flash. I don't remember the next few minutes. Waylen frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I woke up later with a board half through my skull and blood on my hands. His eyes stayed on the floor. Eli was dead. I was alive, and I couldn't explain monsters no one believed in. Waylen said nothing because there was nothing right enough to say. Wesley continued. There was an investigation, trial, questions. His voice hardened. People like answers they can put in paperwork. Creature from underground that whispers your guilt back at you doesn't fit neatly in a report. He looked up. Dark glasses, cowboy hat, a man built out of old damage. So yes, kid, for years, I wondered if maybe I did it. Maybe grief made me invent the rest. Outside, a whisper came, soft and right against the saloon wall. Remember. Waylen froze. They do that a lot? Unfortunately. A claw dragged slowly across the wooden wall, then another, then another. They were surrounding them. Waylen's pulse slammed. I would like to formally resign. Wesley handed him another Molotov. Denied. Something slammed against the front door. Both men snapped toward it. Another hit came, harder this time, and the wood splintered. A shriek echoed from outside, then many, a chorus. Waylen tightened his grip. How many? Wesley lit the end of his cigar, then used it to light the rag of the bottle in his hand. Orange flame bloomed between them. His voice was calm. Too calm. All of them. The front doors exploded inward. The first creature came through the saloon doors, already on fire. It hit the floor screaming, black-scaled limbs thrashing through broken glass and spilled whiskey, knocking over chairs as flames crawled up its back. Waylen stared. That is somehow worse than I imagined. Focus. More shapes poured in behind it. Too many. Black eyes, hooked claws, and bodies moving with that terrible not-human speed. Wesley threw the Molotov. The bottle shattered against the floorboards and fire bloomed fast, racing across old liquor-soaked wood in hungry orange lines. The saloon became an oven. Heat slammed into them and creatures shrieked as flames caught. Waylen fired the shotgun. The recoil nearly sent him into another zip code, but the Shadow Stalker in front of him dropped hard. He blinked. I regret nothing. Another one launched over the bar. Wesley caught it midair with a shot to the chest, then buried his knife into its throat before it hit the ground. Years of rage had made him efficient. "Back door!" he shouted. Waylen fired again and missed. The creatures were learning. They moved around the flames now, climbing walls and crawling across the ceiling beams, using the smoke like cover. One dropped behind Waylen. Wesley saw it first. Down! Waylen ducked without question as gunfire cracked over his head. Black blood splattered across the piano, which, somehow offended by this, collapsed dramatically. Waylen hit the floor coughing. I liked that piano. You never met that piano. We had chemistry. Wesley grabbed him by the jacket and hauled him upright. Move! They burst through the back door into the cold desert night and stumbled into the alley behind the saloon. Smoke poured from the windows and firelight painted the whole town in hell-colored shadows. Waylen bent over, hands on his knees, trying to remember how lungs worked. Wesley scanned the rooftops, waiting, listening, and thinking. The church, always back to the church. Another flash. Young Wesley, gun raised, Eli alive. West, listen to me. The creatures were in the basement, not the rafters. The basement. The memory slammed into place so hard, Wesley physically staggered. Waylen looked up. Whoa, hey, you good? No, but clearer. For the first time in 30 years. Clear. Wesley looked toward the church, not the sanctuary, but below it. The old cellar. That was where it happened. That was where Eli died. Not upstairs, not the altar. Below, buried. His voice came out rough. They nest underground. Waylen blinked. Okay. The church cellar, that's where they come from. That's where we end this. Waylen stared at him for half a second, then nodded. No hesitation, no argument, just trust. Okay. That hit Wesley harder than expected because 30 years ago someone else had said okay and followed him into hell. He still heard that scream. He still carried it. Not this time. Not again. They moved fast through the back streets, cutting between houses while Deadstone howled around them. Creatures hunted in the distance. Some fed, some searched, some watched. The whole town had become a trap. As they neared the church again, Waylen spoke quietly. If this goes bad... Wesley didn't look at him. It will. Waylen ignored that. If this goes bad, I just want to say, working with you has been the coolest thing I've ever done. Wesley kept walking. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. I'm serious. I know, that's why it's sad. Waylen gave a nervous laugh, then softer. You're a good man, Wesley." That one landed because Wesley had spent 30 years believing the opposite. He stared at the church steps ahead, at the place that had stolen half his life, and at the place waiting to either kill him or finally let him go. His hand tightened on his gun. "Kid." Waylen looked over. "If I tell you to run..." Waylen sighed. "I'm not going to like the rest of this sentence, am I?" "No." "Okay. Run anyway." Silence. Then Waylen smiled faintly. Respectfully? Wesley already knew. No. Waylen checked the shotgun. "I think I'll be ignoring that." For the first time, Wesley smiled. Small, tired, and real. "Yeah," he said. "I figured." The church cellar door was exactly where he remembered it, hidden behind the altar, half buried beneath old wood and bad decisions. Waylen helped drag the heavy rug aside, revealing warped cellar doors beneath, their iron handles rusted dark with age and blood, fresh. Waylen stared. "I hate basement doors." "Reasonable." From below came the sound of movement, scratching, whispering, breathing, many of them, waiting. Wesley stood over the doors with his revolver in one hand and a Molotov in the other, his heart beat slow now. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. This was the place. This was where 30 years had been living inside him. He looked at the old wood and finally remembered everything. Not fragments. Not flashes. Truth. 30 years ago, the town had already known. Deadstone always knew. They just called it different names depending on who was drinking. Demons, devils, buried sinners. But the old families knew better. Shadow Stalkers. Creatures that slept beneath the town and woke every 30 years hungry. Fed by blood, drawn to heat and smart enough to wait. The church had been built over the original mine shaft where they nested. Not to worship, but to keep watch and keep them buried. Every generation, someone ignored the warnings. This time it had been the mayor. A greedy little man with debts and secrets who thought opening the old cellar would find silver in the tunnels. Instead, he opened the nest. People started vanishing and the town stayed quiet because fear in small towns was often louder than truth. Then Eli and Wesley arrived. Young, stubborn, and certain. Eli had figured it out first. That night, they came to burn it, and Wesley had said, "We go together." Eli had laughed, like always. "If I die in a church, I'm haunting you forever." They opened the cellar, and hell answered. Wesley had fired until the gun clicked empty. Eli had dragged him back. Then, the board. Something slammed into Wesley's skull, and he hit the floor, dazed and bleeding. Through blurred vision, he saw Eli still fighting, holding the creatures back and shouting, "Run, West!" Wesley had tried to reach him, but blood and darkness took him first. He hadn't killed Eli. Eli had saved him. The truth hit like grief all over again. Wesley stood in the present, older now, staring at the cellar doors with tears he refused to let fall. 30 years of carrying the wrong guilt. Beside him, Waylen was quiet. He understood. Wesley took a slow breath and said, "I left him here." Waylen answered softly, "No." Wesley looked at him. Waylen held the shotgun tighter. "He made sure you lived. Simple, clean, mercy." Sometimes healing sounded like that. No speeches, just truth. Outside, the church bell rang once, violent. The town was screaming louder now as the cycle finished. Wesley lit the Molotov, orange flame blooming in his hand. His voice was steady. "This ends tonight." He grabbed the cellar doors and pulled them open. Darkness breathed back. The smell hit first. Rot, wet earth, and old blood. It was something ancient and wrong, like the ground itself had been holding its breath for 30 years and finally exhaled. Waylen stood at the top of the cellar stairs with the shotgun clutched so tightly his hands hurt. Below them, darkness stretched down into the earth. Not normal darkness, but living darkness, the kind that felt like it was looking back. He leaned slightly toward Wesley. "If I say this feels like the world's worst Airbnb, is that helping?" Wesley lit another cigar. "No." "Cool, just checking." The narrow wooden stairs groaned under their boots as they descended. Each step felt like volunteering for a terrible idea. The walls changed halfway down, from old church foundation to rough stone and old mine support beams, splintered with age and stained black with something Waylen absolutely did not want identified. Bones lay everywhere, animal mostly. Probably, hopefully. He decided not to ask. At the bottom, the tunnel opened wide into an old mine shaft, collapsed in places but still sprawling deeper beneath the town. Church lanterns, long dead, hung from hooks in the stone, and tracks from an old mining cart disappeared into the dark. Everywhere they looked, there were nests, twisted piles of cloth, bones, and things that had once belonged to people. Wedding rings, children's shoes, a sheriff's badge, a bicycle bell, and a doll's hand. Waylen stopped. Oh. That quiet little sound somehow hurt more than a scream. This wasn't hunting, this was feeding. This was generations of people disappearing and everyone deciding silence was easier. Wesley stood still, his jaw locked. This was where Eli died. This was where 30 years had lived. Then movement. Soft. From deeper in the mine, black eyes began opening in the dark. One pair, then another, then dozens. Watching, waiting. Waylen slowly raised the shotgun. Well, he swallowed. That feels like enough nightmares for one town. The whispering started, low and surrounding, voices layered over each other like broken prayers. Remember. 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 The creatures moved closer, crawling along walls, across ceilings, and between beams. There were too many to count. Wesley handed Waylen 2 Molotovs. When I say run, Waylen sighed immediately. We have discussed this. Kid. No. Waylen. That made him pause. Wesley almost never used his first name. In the dim light, the older man looked older somehow, and softer, not weaker, just honest. "If this goes wrong," his voice was rough. "You were the best partner I ever had." Waylen stared. Emotion hit so suddenly it annoyed him because this was absolutely not the time. He blinked hard. "Well," he said, voice thinner than he wanted, "that was a terrible thing to say right before Monster War." Wesley almost smiled. "Yeah." Waylen adjusted his grip, trying not to let his hand shake. "For the record, you're also the best partner I've had." Wesley gave him a look. "You've only had one." "Exactly, undefeated." That did it. A short, real laugh. Then the first Shadow Stalker screamed and launched itself from the ceiling, and hell officially reopened. The first Molotov shattered against the tunnel wall and turned the mine into daylight. Fire roared across old wood and bone nests, climbing fast through the dry beams. Creatures shrieked as flames caught, black bodies twisting in orange light. Waylen fired the shotgun beside him, the blast echoing like thunder underground. One Shadow Stalker folded backward into the fire, but another kept coming anyway. "Why do they all have such terrible boundaries?" Waylen shouted. Wesley fired twice. "Focus!" The tunnel exploded into chaos as creatures dropped from the ceiling, claws scraped stone, and smoke thickened. The whole nest was waking. Wesley moved forward instead of back, toward the deepest part of the mine, toward the place memory kept dragging him. Because there was one more thing, one more truth. At the far end of the shaft stood the old mining chamber, half collapsed and stone broken, and there, caught beneath old beams and 30 years of dust, lay Eli's sheriff badge, not the one upstairs. The real one, bent, buried, waiting. Wesley stopped breathing. He stepped toward it like approaching a grave. Flash. Eli smiling, Eli laughing, Eli saying, "If I die in a church, I'm haunting you forever." Flash. A scream behind him snapped the moment apart. "Waylen." Wesley turned to see a Shadow Stalker had knocked him against the stone wall, pinning him by the throat as jaws opened wide. The exact same angle. The exact same moment. History was daring him to fail twice. No, not again. Wesley moved before thought, gun empty, knife gone. Only instinct and rage remained. He grabbed a broken mining pick and drove it through the creature's spine. It collapsed over Waylen. Dead, still, silence. For one terrible second, Wesley stood there shaking, not from age, but from the fact that this time he had been fast enough. Waylen shoved the corpse off, coughing. His tie was somehow even worse. He looked up. "I'm starting to think field training is a little aggressive." Wesley let out a broken laugh. He pulled him to his feet, hands steady now. "Alive." Very quietly, like speaking to a ghost, he said, "I got you." Waylen frowned. "What?" Wesley shook his head. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was 30 years of guilt finally cracking open. The mine groaned, loud, structural, and bad. Fire had reached the support beams, and the whole nest was starting to collapse. Wesley grabbed Eli's badge from the dirt, closed his fist around it, and felt the weight in his chest shift. Not gone, but lighter enough. He looked at Waylen. Run. This time, Waylen did. They sprinted through smoke and falling beams as the tunnels collapsed in waves of fire behind them, up the cellar stairs, through the church, and into the cold night air, just as the ground beneath Deadstone shuddered. The church bell rang once, violent and final. Then part of the cellar gave way with a thunderous crash. Dust exploded into the sky. Silence followed. Real silence, not the waiting kind. The ending kind. Wesley stood in the street, covered in blood and smoke, breathing like a man who had just outrun 30 years. Beside him, Waylen bent over with hands on his knees. I would like to formally request desk duty forever. Wesley lit a cigar with shaking hands as the first rays of sunrise broke over Deadstone. Soft gold fell across ruined streets and dead creatures. They sat on the church steps together, battered and bloody, while morning reclaimed the town. Wesley stared at the sun, at the quiet, and at the end of something old. He pulled out a second cigar and offered it. Waylen looked at it suspiciously. Is this a promotion? Don't ruin the moment. Waylen took it, lit it, and immediately coughed like his soul was trying to leave his body. Wesley laughed, real this time, full and unstoppable. Waylen pointed accusingly. This is attempted murder. It builds character. It builds lung disease. They sat there in the sunrise, surrounded by ruin and a hard-earned silence. Finally, Wesley looked out over Deadstone. I think it may be time I retire, kid. Waylen leaned back against the church steps, still holding the cigar like it had personally offended him. He smiled. There ain't no way you are, boss. Wesley gave him a look over the smoke. It's Wesley. Waylen grinned. Sure it is. The sun climbed higher. The town breathed. And for the first time in a very long time, Wesley West let the past stay buried.
People think surviving something makes you feel victorious, like there should be music, or like the sun comes up and suddenly everything inside you is fixed. That's not how it works. Surviving feels quieter than that. It feels like sitting on church steps in a town nobody will believe, tasting blood and bad cigars, and realizing your hands are still shaking. It feels like hearing silence where screaming used to live. It feels like finally understanding that guilt and grief are not the same thing. For 30 years, I thought I left a man behind. Truth was, he made sure I got out, and I spent half my life punishing myself for surviving. Funny thing about ghosts, sometimes they're not haunting you. Sometimes they're just waiting for you to forgive yourself. Deadstone will make the papers. Gas leak, structural collapse, missing persons. The kind of lies people prefer because monsters are harder to file. That's fine. Some truths don't need headlines. Some things belong to the people who crawled out alive. Waylen still calls me boss. I still tell him not to. He still does it anyway. Maybe I'll retire. Maybe I won't. Truth is, I don't know how to be a man without unfinished business. But I do know this. When the church bell rings at night now, I don't hear a warning. I hear Eli laughing, telling me I still owe him a decent bottle of whiskey. He'd be right. And if Deadstone ever wakes again, well, let it. This time, I'll remember.